Namaste. Welcome to my podcast. All right. Today I'm not going to have my monologue that I usually start with because every extra minute with today's guest is far more valuable than me yapping in the beginning. I would like to thank Hari Kiranji for helping me out for this podcast. He has been extremely helpful. My guest today is Venkat Dhulipala, who is the author of Creating a New Medina, State Power, Islam, and the Quest for Pakistan in Late Colonial North India. We will try to cover some of the aspects of his book today. Before we start the conversation, I would like to tell you guys a bit about Venkatji. So here we go. Venkatji is an associate professor of history at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He has a PhD in history from the University of Minnesota and a master's degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison and the University of Hyderabad. He grew up in North India, where his father worked in BHEL. Till his ninth class, he was in the northern part of India before coming to the south for the first time to live in Hyderabad. He did his BA in Nizam College, Hyderabad, MA Political Science at University of Hyderabad. By the way, he did not go to JNU, even though he topped the entrance exam in 1992 in political science. Now that's a miracle. And by the way, bravo that he did not go to JNU, otherwise we would have lost one more fine mind. Now that, my dear friends, Hindi mein kehte na, is an asli sher. Another interesting piece of information about Venkatji, he never had history in BA or MA and found himself in a history department for the first time in his PhD. He started archival research on the PhD in September to October 2003 and finished his PhD in 2008. The book that we are discussing today was done by October 2014. So basically, Venkatji has spent the last 11 years of his life on this particular book. Wow. So Venkatji, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kushal.
So Venkatji, while we start the podcast, like I said, I wanted to begin with, let's say, what made you write this book? Why did you think of this topic as being so important to write this book?
Before we get started, you mentioned me as an asli sher or whatever it is. But I did not go to JNU, but that was entirely for personal reasons. I had family, pressing family commitments, and I had to stay back in Hyderabad. So, in any case, whatever reasons, I did not go to JNU. Yeah, coming to this book, how do you, the process by which one really arrives at a topic, on which one, first goes on to do a PhD and then writes a book is a kind of a very long, circuitous one. And, as one of my friends said, you sometimes fall backwards into some of these things. But anyways, I was always interested in the question of intercommunity relations in India. And I was initially interested in studying this thing called the Muslim Mass Contact Program, which the Congress started in between 1937-39 as part of its effort. This was some kind of an outreach, an attempt to involve the in Congress party activities to make them to kind of have greater number of Muslims join the Congress. And this program in the end fails. And I was when I began the PhD, I just wanted to work on something which would be a small topic, something which could be manageable, something I could finish fairly quickly and move on. But as I kind of went into the archives, Teen Murti, National Archives, so on and so forth, I realized that whatever I was doing, would kind of, work for a chapter, but certainly not something I would like to develop into a PhD thesis. And then, of course, I also got interested into this whole question of the trajectory of the Pakistan movement itself. I had been reading a lot about the partition. Remember, I went to grad school in the US, that is to Wisconsin-Madison. in '97. That happens to be the the 50th anniversary of independence and partition. And so, well, a veritable industry had emerged. Of course, a whole lot of things happening in the media, in the press, so on and so. And of course, what you also saw was a new literature emerging on the partition. So in any case, as I was reading more and more about as I delved deeper into this literature, some questions kind of struck me, and I thought, these were questions worth answering. And the question that really struck me was that here is, an event of such great magnitude, the partition happening, and what the existing body of historical scholarship would have us believe is that, on the one hand, Pakistan, this whole idea of Pakistan remained a very vague idea. Nobody knew what it was. It was just a vague emotional slogan, and that millions who kind of supported the idea or opposed the idea did it without understanding its meaning or implications. So here the idea is that, on the one hand, the top leadership, the Muslim leadership, including Mr. Jinnah, never quite defined Pakistan. And on the other hand, the idea that, well, the people just went behind charismatic personalities, or went behind slogans. Okay, either that Islam is in danger, or just Pakistan. Now, I ask myself this very simple question: if we are, as we now like to believe, an argumentative society in which just about everything is discussed, debated, thrashed out, with a great passion in great detail, how is it that this idea of Pakistan, once this bombshell called Pakistan is dropped at Lahore in 1940, how come nobody talks about it, discusses it, debates it? How do the people really understand this thing called Pakistan, and how is popular support mobilized behind this enormous movement? So the question was basically, again, how was this idea of Pakistan articulated, discussed, and debated in the public? And how was popular mobilization, managed in pursuit of this goal? And I thought that the UP would be a terrific place to ask this. The UP would be the place to look at this question, because the UP is the place where the idea of Pakistan finds its earliest, most overwhelming and sustained support. This is the crucible for the idea of Pakistan. And so I kind of got started on this, on this question. And it took me some years to finish researching this. First finish researching it, and then go about first reading through a whole lot of texts. And much of the work that I have done is looking at the Urdu press, pamphlets, theological tracts, so on and so forth, to then kind of go about writing my book.
Okay, Venkatji, now you mentioned when in your introduction, where you were talking about this, there was this very vague idea, and in a way, in fact, in the beginning of your book, you do mention the work of Ayesha Jalal and a few others. Could you, for the listeners, could you explain what they really meant when they said, "Oh, there was no tangible idea," and what was their explanation as to why the partition happened?
Okay, well, you mentioned the historian Ayesha Jalal. And her book, which is called The Sole Spokesman, that came out in 1985. And the spokesman was at that point in time a very unorthodox thesis, but it went on to become the orthodoxy in the field. Now, Jalal's question was that, there is this thing called Pakistan. And then how did this Pakistan come about, which fitted the interests of most Muslims so poorly? Because you look at it after partition happens, and post-partition, as far as the fate of Muslims in South Asia is concerned, they've been, they've lost out a whole lot. So the question was, as Jalal said, how did a Pakistan come about which fitted the interests of most Muslims so poorly? Now, in addressing this question, what Jalal does is that she analyzes the Pakistan movement, the struggle for Pakistan, through the figure of Mr. M.A. Jinnah, through his angle of vision. And what she tries to do is to, first of all, the assumption is that, excuse me. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, because my computer just made a big sound. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. So what Jalal does is to focus on the high politics of the partition, because it is believed that it is the strategies, tactics, motivations, politics of these men at the very top which decides the fates of the millions in the subcontinent. And so she asked the question, so she then decided to kind of look at Mr. Jinnah's strategy, tactics, because he's after all the putative father of Pakistan. So what Jalal does is she tries to argue that Mr. Jinnah never wanted a Pakistan, that he was in fact using Pakistan as some kind of a bargaining counter to gain for the Indian Muslims a position of equality with their more preponderant Hindus in an undivided India. So what Jalal is saying is that the father of Pakistan never in fact wanted Pakistan to come into existence itself. The other thing, so what she therefore is arguing is that who's responsible for the partition. So the implication is that it is the Congress and its leadership which pushes Jinnah down the road as far as partition is concerned, which is ultimately responsible for this catastrophe. After all, it leads to the death of an estimated 1 million people and the forced migration, to put it mildly, of another 12 to 13 million people. So what you see is that Jalal overturns the existing common sense as far as the partition is concerned on its head, to argue that it was not Jinnah who was responsible for the partition, but it is the Congress leadership. Now, the other thing which needs to be remembered is, you may ask the question that what about the people who supported the Muslim League and Mr. Jinnah? And the title of the book is, of course, The Sole Spokesman. That Jinnah is the supreme leader of the Muslim community in India, and therefore their sole spokesman. And what Jalal argues is that, as I quote, as regards popular conceptions of Pakistan, Jalal dismisses them tersely, noting that, and I quote, a host of conflicting shapes and forms, most of them vague, were given to what remained little more than a catch-all, an undefined slogan. So the whole idea is that, you just need to look at this very, very narrow theater as far as action is concerned. That is the negotiating tables, in Delhi, Shimla, London, in these very high chambers, as far, so this is where politics is happening. Out there, you need not bother too much about it. Now, the opposition to this thesis comes from another historian, Anita Inder Singh, in 1987, a couple of years after the Jalal thesis, in which she tries to show how, to say that Mr. Jinnah never wanted Pakistan, she says, is quite untenable. After all, he has a very clear vision as to what he means by Pakistan, and he goes about achieving it with in a very, very cold-blooded, calculated fashion. And therefore, she tries to kind of throw the ball back into Jinnah's court, so to say. Now, if you have, the first, wave of partition scholarship focusing on the high politics of the partition, you then later on have regional studies as far as the Pakistan movement is concerned, looking at the Pakistan movement in Punjab, in Bengal, so on and so forth. And if you look at it, say, for example, in the case of Punjab, the argument again is that, the whole idea of Pakistan catches fire a lot later in Punjab. And even here, the comprehension of this, it's an idea which is not quite comprehended. What it means, not terribly clear. And it kind of, in a way, contributes to this earlier idea that Pakistan remains a very vague idea for most people. Now, if you look at the next wave of partition scholarship, which happens in the wake of the 50th anniversary of the partition in 97, you have, the new sets of scholars saying that, let's not talk about these, these great leaders or focus on great man history. After all, these people created, they created this mess for which, it's the common people who paid such a heavy price. So let's rather, instead of going into the causes of the partition to see who was responsible for it, let's look at the lives of these millions of people, who went through that catastrophe, who millions died and, were displaced. So, what happened to the women, to the refugees, children, so on and so forth. So here, the focus is on the consequences. So instead of looking at, archival, documents, so on and so forth, what you see is a greater focus on the personal life stories of these people. So you have ethnography happening in which, you have researchers going and talking to these various people who lived through those, very tumultuous times and trying to recreate, a certain, conception of what it was like in the 1940s. Now, even these, even these sets of scholars, when they're, when they're looking at the partition, they assume that these people who went through this process really did not have much of a clue as to what was happening. They just basically paying the price of stupid decisions taken at the top. So again, what you see is a scholarship basically congealing around the twin poles of Jinnah on the one hand and Toba Tek on the other. Yeah. So the question therefore remains, there is this huge middle ground. There is this public sphere. What is it that is happening here? How is this idea of Pakistan actually being talked about, discussed, debated, and how is popular mobilization happening? For or against Pakistan? So what I try to say is that what my own research shows is that it's not as if people have no clue as to what Pakistan is. There is an enormously sophisticated debate. Discussion, debate in in the columns of the press, through public meetings, political conferences, through an election campaign 45-46, in which this idea of Pakistan is thrashed out, in terms of what it means, what are its implications, and there is a fairly thorough understanding as far as what Pakistan means and what are its implications. And this is, this evidence basically comes mostly from the UP, where I, which is the, which is where I worked, which is the area on which I worked. And so the idea is, so either the supporters of Pakistan or the opponents of Pakistan, they kind of put out the reasons as to why Pakistan is good or why Pakistan is bad. Yeah. So, and these are fairly well articulated arguments, in which you have facts, data, figures, maps, an idea, a debate on what would be Pakistan's natural resources, its infrastructural assets, its strategic location, the nature of its population, what would be the implications for minority-majority relations in these two, in both India, in Hindu India and Pakistan. So all these questions are, are kind of thoroughly, debated and discussed and thrashed out. So this took me myself by surprise, because the reading of the secondary literature on the existing literature on Pakistan had not prepared me for what I found during the archival research that I did. So, I would say that I would argue that to say that Pakistan was a vague idea, which they somehow, accidentally happened or became a nation state in 1947, is at least, I would argue, is a fairly untenable argument to make.
All right, now I wanted to talk to you because obviously now we have to go to the next stage of your book, where obviously you thrash out and explain how Pakistan was a very solid argument made from the end of the Muslim League. Now, in your book, interestingly, you have placed a very big chapter which you titled "Two Constitutional Lawyers from Bombay and the Debate Over Pakistan in the Public Sphere." Obviously, the two constitutional lawyers you mentioned are Dr. Ambedkar and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Now, Ambedkar's book about Pakistan, or the idea of Pakistan, was something which was used by both the sides, as you say, according to their their own ideology and their own take. So could you explain a bit about Ambedkar's role in this whole process?
When we talk about Ambedkar, we generally do not associate him with Pakistan or with the idea of Pakistan at all. We generally see him as the father of the Indian Constitution, as someone who led the struggle for emancipation of the Dalit population in India, so on and so forth. But very few associate him in any way with Pakistan. And, so which is why I was really surprised that in the existing literature, there had been, practically no discussion as far as Ambedkar and the idea of Pakistan is concerned. And here, to kind of put this in context, Ambedkar is the first person to actually put out this whole, to kind of to articulate the meaning, the implications of Pakistan in the most coherent manner. So he starts writing this book, immediately after, the Lahore Resolution is passed in March 1940. I think between 24th of March 1940, the Lahore Resolution, the Lahore conferences, the Lahore session of the Muslim League is held. And soon after, of course, there is a big hullabaloo in the press about, what soon comes to be known as the Pakistan Resolution. The Lahore Resolution is immediately dubbed the Pakistan Resolution. So Ambedkar starts working on it. And by August of 1940, he has prepared this report, which he presents to the Independent Labour, the executive of the Independent Labour Party, of which he is a member. And then this book is published. So, he creates a report which is almost 400 pages long, with many appendices, with maps, with various tables, including all kinds of figures, statistics, laying out the arguments for and against Pakistan. And it's an astonishing work, that he manages to put together in about 4 months' time. And this is then published in early 1941. You see the foreword is written, he signs off on, I think, 25th December 1940. And by early 1941, this is in the public sphere. And, Ambedkar's book is enormously influential. If you look at it, as Ambedkar himself says, that he says that the thoughts, ideas, arguments contained in the book have been pillaged by authors, politicians, editors of newspapers to support their sides. But even though the book's argument and even its language had been lifted without any attribution to its author, Ambedkar declared himself to be satisfied with the results. It had been of lot of service to the public, and supplied a real want, even if it had consumed a lot of his valuable time and given him a headache. He also points out with, justifiable pride that both Gandhi and Jinnah, during their widely publicized 1944 talks, which are held in Jinnah's residence on Manabar Hill, had cited the book, Ambedkar's book, as the authority on the subject, which might be consulted with advantage. Yeah. So Ambedkar's book becomes the fundamental text, the ur-text, if either, anybody wants to understand what this idea of Pakistan is. Now, previously, there had been very little discussion of Ambedkar's book or its impact on the public debate on Pakistan. And even those who had briefly talked about his book say that, he maintains a kind of a Socratic neutrality as far as this whole question is concerned. And he's neither for or against Pakistan. He's just laying out, arguments for and arguments against Pakistan. Now, I, however, argue that if you read the text closely enough, Ambedkar is making his views on Pakistan fairly clear. In fact, in the preface to his book, Ambedkar, in a rather puckish manner, says that he says it would be idle pretense to say that he had no views on Pakistan. As he says, views I have, some of them are expressed, others may have to be gathered. As he says, he has an open mind, not an empty mind. So his views on the subject would have to be discerned by the careful reader of the treatise, and therefore demanded a serious engagement with the text on part of his readers. Now, how do I look at Ambedkar's text on Pakistan? If you look at Ambedkar's Thoughts on Pakistan, 1941, and the second edition comes out 1945, it's called Pakistan or the Partition of India. Now, if you look at the first edition, which is Thoughts on Pakistan, Ambedkar is, if you look at the arrangement of the text itself, the first small portion of the text basically lays out arguments for the creation of Pakistan, and this is a very small section. And the basis on which Ambedkar says, well, we should, or the argument that Ambedkar is making for the creation of Pakistan is that, hey, there is an enormous amount of support behind it. The Indian Muslims want it.
Yes.
And if they are clamoring for it, who's anybody to deny that claim? After all, even the Indian National Congress is demanding independence from the British. When you don't dismiss that demand, how can you dismiss the Pakistan demand, which also has a lot of popular support behind it? So it's basically a argument saying that there's an enormous amount of popular support, and therefore on that only on that basis, Pakistan needs to be conceded. Now, whether this is something which is a sane thing to do, is something that he addresses in the second, in the major part of his book. And here, what he does is he addresses himself to the Congress and the Hindus. And the overall argument he's making is that just let go of Pakistan. It's what I call a good riddance theory of Pakistan. That in fact, if you forcibly keep Pakistan within an undivided India, we are going to be constantly in a state of civil war. This is something which is going to infect the army. The army will be kind of infected with a communal mentality. All institutions of state are going to be infected with this, with the communal virus. We are going to, we're going to be under enormous amounts of problems, if we keep Pakistan. So, I go through in great detail the reasons why, why he goes about trying to persuade the Hindus to kind of just concede Pakistan because it's in their own best interest. So to begin with, he's first kind of demolishes, what he calls sentimental Hindu objections to Pakistan, saying that, this area which is being claimed for Pakistan was always part of, Bharatvarsh, or, of India. You look at ancient empires, the Mauryan Empire, and so on and so forth. They included Pakistan, what are parts of Afghanistan, so on and so forth. And Ambedkar says that, that may have been true in the past, but a certain history has happened, in the meanwhile. And this area that is now being claimed by the Muslim League for Pakistan is now, you can no longer say that, it shares, a whole lot with Hindu India. And if, there is a major movement for, separation, one should let it go. The second thing he's arguing about is that, it is really important for the army, and that's his most, that's a very major concern with him, that the army should remain an institution which is free of this communal virus. And he says, you look at it, if you don't concede Pakistan, there's going to be a whole lot of problems here. And, as he says that, he asks a very, a hypothetical question. What if, how would the Muslims in the Indian army react to an invasion by a Muslim leaguer like Afghanistan? Or what if India, in its own national interests, was to kind of wage war on Afghanistan or invade it? And he says that, he says that, he believes that, the Muslim soldiers in the Indian army would kind of rebel, or they would not take orders of this kind to attack a fellow Muslim to attack another Muslim country. And he also says that, so some of the language that he uses is, would be deemed rather politically incorrect in these times. But so he points out that this is something that would clearly splinter the Indian army, so to say. So that's one reason he says we should kind of give it up. The other thing he says is that the communal problem in India will never be resolved. We'll have a constant civil war, and we kind of continue to hold on to Pakistan. And therefore, Ambedkar is the first guy who says we need to, first of all, partition India, but not just that. He calls for the partitioning of both Punjab and Bengal on the basis of demographic majorities at the level of the districts. So Western Punjab should go to Pakistan, as would Eastern Bengal go to East Pakistan. And the other thing that Ambedkar mentioned, Ambedkar recommends, is transfers of population. And this is something both Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League are also constantly harping about, that there should be transfers of population. So Ambedkar is somebody who is he calls himself a very clear-eyed realist, a hard-headed realist, and he's asking the starry-eyed Congress leadership to become more real, to not just dismiss the Pakistan demand. And the other final argument he says why we should let go of Pakistan is, he says that the Muslim League has inaugurated a brand of politics which is totally communal. It is something, it places religion, it valorizes religion as the major category as far as politics is concerned. So anything else, be it, class issues or whatever it is, so it's what the Muslim League is doing is that if we are to have a secular politics in India, we need to kind of let go of these folks who want a Pakistan on the basis of religion. Until and unless, we let go, we can't have the rise of a secular politics in India. And therefore, and finally, he says that, if you do not let go of the Muslim League is demanding a 50% share in everything for the Muslim community in India. And therefore, what it's trying to do is basically converting a minority into a majority, it's converting a minority into an equal sharer with the majority. Yeah. So even though the Muslims would be about 25% of India, they're demanding a 50% share in everything, like 50% share as far as judges in the Supreme Court are concerned, a 50% share in, legislative decisions, so on and so forth. And this is not just, this not just militates against a one man, one vote principle in most Westminster style democratic systems, but it is also eating into the rights, the quotas for other minorities in India. So for all these reasons, Ambedkar believes that Pakistan should be conceded. It's a kind of a good riddance theory that he comes up with. And in 1945, in 1955, in fact, after partition has happened, it's almost 10 years later, in his Thoughts on Linguistic States, Ambedkar writes something which is absolutely startling. You can read this, and I would quote, this is a slightly long quote, I'd beg you to bear with me. He says, I was glad that India was separated from Pakistan. I was the philosopher, so to say, of Pakistan. I advocated partition because I felt that it was only by partition that Hindus would not only be independent but free. If India and Pakistan had remained united in one state, the Hindus, though independent, would have been at the mercy of the Muslims. A merely independent India would not have been a free India from the point of view of the Hindus. It would have been a government of one country by two nations, and of these two, the Muslims without question would have been the ruling race, notwithstanding the Hindu Sabha and Mahasabha and the Jansangh. When the partition took place, I felt that God was willing to lift his curse and let India be one, great and prosperous. I was myself very stunned when I kind of read this. This is in Thoughts on Linguistic States, Ambedkar's book, which comes out in 1955. Yeah. So Ambedkar, it's not like, as some have argued, that Ambedkar was taking either this very neutral position, or that he may have been making these rhetorical arguments at a particular point in time to for whatever reasons, either to test the waters, or to push for some other agenda that he may have had. It's not, this is, Ambedkar truly believes that, the division of the country has to happen. Otherwise, it's going to be catastrophe on all sides.
It's fascinating, and I'm glad you've mentioned this particular aspect of the book in such detail. अभी आज अगर ये चीज़ अगर कोई आके टीवी पे बोले, तो हमारे ग्रेट सेक्युलरिस्ट इंडिया के, वो तो आज बाबा साहेब अम्बेडकर को भी कम्युनल पॉलिटिशियन बना देंगे.
Well, the trajectory of the term secular and communal itself has a history. So what, those who would be secular or those who, who is secular and who is communal, changes according to the historical context, let's say.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, in India, this whole scenario with what is secular, what is communal, and what constitutes and what is everybody's idea of free speech. I mean, in fact, I am thinking of making a t-shirt which says, I believe in free speech as long as you agree with what I have to say.
Oh, no. No. I think, ultimately we all need to, we all have different points of view, and I think put them across in moderate speech, and we may agree to disagree, but we leave it at that. That's all.
Okay, now moving on to the which I believe is the आपके book की जो जान है, which starts from chapter 4, and I believe this is a segment which I have kind of made it out from chapter 4 to right to the end, which is now what was the Muslim side's demand of the idea of Pakistan. I mean, I would want you to explain it in two aspects. As in, aspect number one would be how it started conceptually with the Muslim League. What was the Muslim League's thought process in this? And then how the Muslim League used the Ulama to kind of bolster its demand for Pakistan, and what was the opposing side within the Ulama too. So can you explain that now?
See, to begin with, one needs to remember that There are, of course, the Muslim League comes up with the Pakistan demand, lays out, the meaning and implications of Pakistan. It lays out that this is what they mean by Pakistan. This is what they wish to achieve. And of course, they do mobilize, overwhelming support. Yeah. But it also needs to be remembered that some of the most eloquent arguments against Pakistan, some of the stoutest opposition to Pakistan comes from within the Muslim community as well. You need to remember also the context. After 1942, Quit India. In August. You have the Quit India resolution, and most of the Congress leadership, including Gandhi, Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, Maulana Azad, Govind Vallabh Pant, Kriplani, so on and so forth. They're all thrown into prison. The only congressman of any standing who's outside prison is Rajagopalachari. And Rajagopalachari himself is the first congressman to very bravely say that, let's bargain with the Muslim League. Let's say, okay, you can have your Pakistan. Let's now come to a kind of an agreement. Yeah. But the thing is that most of the congressmen are in prison as the colonial state clamps down on the Congress. And this is also wartime. You remember the World War is on.
Yes.
And so at this point in time, of course, the Muslim League leadership is not in prison. They do cooperate, Muslim League ministries in Punjab and in Bengal. They cooperate with the war effort. And the only people who are on the ground who are making these very sustained, very intelligent, very sophisticated arguments against Pakistan are broadly, who come under the label called the Nationalist Muslims. And these include both the Ulama as well as Muslim members of the Congress who are not part of the clergy. Now, coming back to so the first point that needs to be remembered is that there is. Some of the stoutest opposition to Pakistan also comes from within the Muslim community, that there is no 100% consensus among the. This is not as if, all the Muslims in India are rooting for Pakistan or anything of that kind. Okay. That's the first point to make. Now, the second point, how does the Muslim League explain the idea of Pakistan to its base? After all, you need to remember that a political leadership, or a political party, when it builds a particular platform, or builds its base, it has to go to the people with a particular set of demands, with a particular program. Say, this is what we stand for. Yeah, lay out their program, and that is how a leadership gains legitimacy for its programs, when it has vast numbers of people supporting it, and therefore supporting the program of the political party. And that is what allows these leaders to then claim a place at the high table where the negotiations are happening. So therefore, one needs to remember this. Secondly, so therefore that, there is a political program with which the Muslim League approaches its base and wins its approval, and it is that which gives it its representative character. So Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League leadership never tire of claiming that the Muslim League, the All India Muslim League, is the sole authoritative representative organization of the Indian Muslims. Yeah, Musalmano ki Wahid Numainda Jamaat.
Yes.
So now, as the Muslim League makes this claim to being Musalmano ki Wahid Numainda Jamaat, what is this idea of Pakistan that they are going to the people with? To begin with, of course, what the Muslim League demands is that these full provinces of Muslim majority, that is Punjab, Sindh, frontier province, Balochistan in the west, and Bengal and Assam in the east. These would be Pakistan, where Pakistan would be created. Secondly, if this is going to be Pakistan, what is going to be the nature of the Pakistani state? And here, the Muslim League leadership, including Mr. Jinnah, at various points in time, they speak with a folk tongue of a particular kind. Yeah, that is, they will say that this is going to be, so the Mr. Jinnah on the one hand may say that this is going to be a Westminster-style parliamentary democracy. You will have majorities, you will have minorities. There will be minority rights, which will be enshrined in the constitution. But he will also say that this is also going to be an Islamic state. Now, what exactly this Islamic state is going to look like? This can is kind of kicked further down the road. The idea is that once we have attained Pakistan, we will fashion it as an Islamic state of a particular kind. So it's going to be some species of an Islamic state. But what exactly it's going to look like, we'll figure it out once we have actually attained Pakistan. To kind of give you an example, there is this meeting that Mr. Jinnah has with a functionary of the Jamaat-e-Islami, which at this point in time is not a popular movement or a party that it now is. This is Mr. Maududi's party. And a functionary of the Jamaat-e-Islami meets Mr. Jinnah and says, what is this, what's Pakistan going to be looking, what's this Pakistan that you are agitating for? You say that it's going to be an Islamic Pakistan. What's it going to be like? And Mr. Jinnah gives him this example that he says, right now we are agitating for this piece of land. Once we have attained it, you are free to build a mosque, according to your own, according to your own light, how you want, I think I'm not exactly putting it right. I have to look for it in the book, but this is practically what he says, that, once we've attained Pakistan, then you are free to build your mosque upon it. Yeah. So this is a kind of a fairly pointed hint. And at certain points in time, Mr. Jinnah says that, Pakistan is going to be an Islamic state, that the Sharia will be the source of law in Pakistan. He talks about Pakistan's economy as being neither capitalist or socialist, but an Islamic economy. Pakistan as an Islamic polity, that Pakistan would be the place, from where, the renaissance would be, a new renaissance would begin in the Muslim world, so to say. So, broadly speaking, it is understood as not just or not simply a Muslim majority state, but an Islamic state. The other thing that the Muslim League will then have to do is that, given the fact that critiques of the Lahore Resolution begin to emerge within weeks, after the Lahore Resolution is passed, they have to talk about, they have to kind of come up with arguments which show how Pakistan is going to be militarily viable, it's going to be economically viable, it's going to be politically sustainable, administratively it's going to be coherent, so on and so forth. So then you have Muslim League propaganda, which is created at the behest of Mr. Jinnah. You look at these two volumes that I talk about, Pakistan and Muslim India, Nationalism and Conflict in India, the publication is, the day, the address is Mr. Jinnah's residence in Bombay. And these volumes are also then translated into Urdu. So this is for both a, for an English speaking audience, an international audience, as well as the Muslim League's base, which may be reading these volumes in Urdu, for example. That these volumes are created, this propaganda happens. And if you look at the columns of of the Urdu press, which is reporting these arguments for Pakistan, in which you have the Muslim League talking about how Pakistan is going to be economically sustainable. So in this regard, they talk about Pakistan's natural resources, its infrastructural assets, the kind of industrialization that can happen in the case of Pakistan, the kind of foreign policy that Pakistan can pursue, the kinds of friendships it would make, so on and so forth. So a series of arguments making it clear that Pakistan is going to be not just a viable state, but a state which could potentially be far more powerful than Hindu India itself. Yeah? This is something which is made out by the Muslim League. And in this regard, we're talking about foreign policy. Pan-Islamism is something that the Muslim League leadership is constantly tom-tomming about. It says, look at, Pakistan's location. And behind us, of course, there's this belt, the belt of all these Muslim countries. That Pakistan is going to be the locus for the unification of the Islamic world, which will kind of unite under Pakistan's leadership. You may think, wow, what a far-fetched kind of belief. But, well, there is some amount of, that they do believe in this vision, that after all, these are some of the most, advanced, or modernized Muslims in the world, who have had an experience of modernity under the most advanced colonial power in the world, who can also bring about an Islamic renaissance, a renaissance in the Islamic world, assume the leadership of the Muslim world. And later on, the Muslim League also talks about how, there is this communist bloc, there is this guy, there's this Western capitalist bloc, and that Pakistan would be leading the Islamic bloc, so to say. So there are all these arguments which are being made in favor of Pakistan. But these arguments are not just made by the Muslim League leadership, they're also made by a significant section of the Ulama. And these are the Ulama who come from Deoband. And this is a section of the Ulama about which I also discuss in my book. I wonder whether the answer is kind of right. You want on and on. Do you want to kind of break this?
No, please.
Okay.
That is why we are podcasting. We need detailed answers.
Okay. So the thing is that you have not just these arguments based on economics or military strategies, so on and so forth, being not just these secular arguments being made for Pakistan, but Islamic arguments being made for Pakistan. And I talk about two key figures here. One is the legendary alim Ashraf Ali Thanvi, who first comes up with this fatwa asking the Muslims to kind of join the Muslim League and the Congress. Joining Congress is haram. You should join the Muslim League, that this is the organization which represents the Indian Muslims. And then his murid, or his disciple, his student, Shabbir Ahmad Usmani. And Shabbir Ahmad Usmani is somebody who comes up with some of the most detailed theological arguments in favor of Pakistan. And before I kind of go into any detail as far as Shabbir Ahmad Usmani's arguments are concerned, we need to first understand who Shabbir Ahmad Usmani was. Because this is a figure that you don't really hear anything about if you are reading any historical scholarship in the English language, or even in the press. Most people would hardly have heard about Shabbir Ahmad Usmani. Now, Shabbir Ahmad Usmani is the person who is pivotal behind the passage of the Objectives Resolution in the Pakistan Constituent Assembly. Then he is also the person who is Pakistan's first and last so-called Sheikh al-Islam, that is the ecclesiastical head of the Muslim community, and he's also the person who formally buries Jinnah. He presides over Mr. Jinnah's state burial.
Yes.
And it's interesting here to note that Mr. Jinnah's state burial happens according to Sunni custom after the private rituals are done according to Shia in Shia custom, because remember, Mr. Jinnah is a Shia. Yeah, but so the private rituals that are done in Mr. Jinnah's residence, before the state burial, happen according to Shia custom, and then the state funeral is held according to Sunni custom. And in fact, when Mr. Jinnah dies, Shabbir Ahmad Usmani compares Mr. Jinnah's passing to the passing of the Prophet. So it's quite a stunning. I was quite, I was quite astounded to see this. That here is this man who we generally understand as this very secular figure. And why do we think of him as a secular figure? क्योंकि भाई जिन्ना साहब तो सूट पहनते थे, दारू पीते थे, कुत्ते पालते थे, कभी दाढ़ी वाड़ी नहीं उगाई थी उन्होंने कभी हज नहीं की. So for all these reasons, because he had a very secular lifestyle that he cultivated, we generally see Mr. Jinnah as a secular politician. But I think we need to be very clear as to what being a secular politician means. I think secularism has to do with the way you do your politics, and it has nothing to do with your lifestyle. Yeah.
Yes.
So Mr. Jinnah, I don't think would qualify, in my opinion, as a secular politician. He was very much a communal politician, so to say. Or well, others may say that he was a Muslim nationalist. But in any case, Mr. Jinnah is in cahoots with these ulama. In fact, Shabbir Ahmad Usmani presides over the Merit session of the Muslim League in 1946. He's part of the Pakistan Constituent Assembly and is, of course, driving force behind the Objectives Resolution. And I think you can put out what the Objectives Resolution means. You can Google it and find what the Objectives Resolution is all about. So Shabbir Ahmad Usmani then comes up with a series of theological arguments for the creation of Pakistan. First of all, he claims that the two-nation theory has its origins in the Quran, so therefore it's beyond the pale of critique in a sense. So in the Quran, of course, there are the believers and then there are the non-believers. So there are the mu'min and there are the kafir. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the distinction as far as nationality, aggregations of the people is concerned, let's say, is between Muslims and non-Muslims. Yeah. So as Shabbir Ahmad Usmani says, so religion can be the only basis of nationality here. So that's the first thing that he is arguing. So he gives a Quranic basis to the two-nation theory. The second thing that Shabbir Ahmad Usmani, argues is that, there is, you look at Pakistan's position on the map, yeah, and he says that look at the distribution of Muslims in India, and he says this is not something which is accidental, but it is part of God's design. Yeah, that this is you have Muslims not just who are they're not just evenly distributed across India as a uniform minority, that they constitute majorities in some critical areas of the subcontinent. Yeah. And it is therefore parts of God's design that Pakistan should come up in these particular areas. And here Shabbir Usmani comes up with the idea of Pakistan as a new Medina. As he points out, you look at it, the Prophet is a native of Mecca, but the new message that he comes up with, it doesn't find many takers in Mecca. In fact, there is active hostility among Meccan elite to his teaching, as a result of which, in order to create the first Islamic community and state, the Prophet has to migrate from Mecca to Medina. And Medina becomes the place where the first Islamic community is created, and many people would believe that also the first Islamic state is created. And it is from Medina that Islam then emerges as the major power, first in Arabia, and then emerges as a global power. Yeah, from Sicily in the west to say Indonesia in the east, becomes a global power, a global civilization. So as he says, the Prophet would have could not have rather created a Pakistan in his native Mecca, but he had to kind of travel to Medina And who is he accompanied by? He is accompanied by his most, trusted, closest followers, who become the muhajirin, these migrants from Mecca, who then, follow the Prophet to Medina, leaving behind their shrines, their dependents, their properties. They make this enormous sacrifice, go to Medina, and there, of course, they are welcomed by the locals who are called Ansar. And
Yes.
it is this cooperation between the Ansar and the Muhajirin which leads to the creation of the first Islamic community and state in Medina. And then it then leads to, well, of course, Islam's, spread and rise as a great global power. Now, he says that during the creation of Medina, the kind of cooperation that you find between Muslims coming from different races, different ethnic groups, sects, so on and so forth, that was a unprecedented kind of cooperation. Yeah, so you have Qurayshis, you have Najdis, you have all kinds of different groups, who are coming together under the banner of the Prophet. Now, similar movement is now happening as far as Muslims in India is concerned. Yeah, you have, as a result of the rise of the Muslim League and the leadership of Jinnah, an unprecedented unity happening as far as Indian Muslims is concerned. And Indian Muslims also can create a truly Islamic state where they are free of both British as well as Hindu domination, in a place where they have a demographic majority of their own, and which is, Pakistan. And therefore, Pakistan, just like Medina is created, in a place where the Muslims have their own, unka jo haan gad ho sake. Similarly, we need to create Pakistan in these specific areas of the Indian subcontinent. So, he sees kind of an Islamic precedent to the creation of Pakistan. First was Pakistan. So the term Pakistan and Medina are then used interchangeably. The Prophet created the first Pakistan in the Arabian Peninsula. We are creating the second Pakistan in the Indian subcontinent. Or the Prophet created the first Medina there. We are creating the second Medina now. Yeah, which is why the title of my book, I borrow this fragment from Shabbir Ahmad Usmani, creating a new Medina.
New Medina,
yeah. So, these are the kinds of, Islamic arguments that Shabbir Ahmad Usmani makes. And he also talks about how, an Islamic state would happen, which would be on the basis of Sharia. But himself here says that this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to happen as a result of negotiations between all the stakeholders, in Pakistan, once Pakistan is created. So we will arrive at it gradually. So in a way, keeping it open, so to say, as so that all the stakeholders can pull together in this fashion. I would like to end this section with just this very brilliant metaphor that Usmani comes up with to kind of make this case as far as Pakistan being an Islamic state is concerned. So first of all, there is this whole idea that Mr. Jinnah is the Qaid-e-Azam, the leader of the Muslim community.
Yeah.
So Usmani says, to especially the most devout, that don't be too concerned by this. After all, we are using the term Qaid-e-Azam for Mr. Jinnah because he happens to be a political leader. And he happens to be a political leader because he's the most skillful politician that we have. He's, after all, a constitutional lawyer, very well versed in constitutional law. And he is the best guy who can negotiate with the British or with the Congress as far as Muslim interests are concerned. So therefore, Mr. Jinnah is our leader and we call him the Qaid-e-Azam, or the great leader. So it's basically his functional specialization, which is what qualifies Mr. Jinnah to the political leadership currently, as far as the Muslim community in India is concerned. So he says, this is a principle that we follow in all spheres of life. So at that point in time, the American wrestler Gama is visiting India. And Gama is famously floored by the. Gama is the Indian wrestler. The American wrestler Zbyszko is visiting India, and Usmani says that Zbyszko comes to India. Do we send Gandhi to fight him? We don't send Gandhi to kind of do kushti with him. Neither do we send Mr. Jinnah, nor do we send Maulana Hussain Ahmad. Who is we'll come to Maulana Hussain Ahmad Madani a little later. We send a wrestler who can really jo Zbyszko ko pachhad sake. And so we send Gama. So similarly, Mr. Jinnah, being the constitutional lawyer, is very apt for the role that he currently has. But then Usmani says this need not be the case always. And here he comes up with another brilliant metaphor. Usmani points out that we Muslims go on Hajj. And when we go on Hajj, we go on these ships to Hijaz, which are, and these ships are skippered by English captains. But he says that these ships, as they approach the port of Jeddah, they stop well short of the port because the port has very many tricky underwater shoals and rocks, which the English captain of the ship is not competent to negotiate. So at this point in time, you have a guy coming from the shore, who a pilot coming from the shore in his little dhow. He comes up in that dhow, comes up to the ship, climbs onto the ship, and then he is the one who guides the English sea captain to berth the ship at the port of Jeddah. And that's when, of course, the faithful disembark, step onto Holy Land to perform the Hajj. Usmani says that Mr. Jinnah is like the English sea captain. He can take the Muslims only so far and no further. At a particular point in time when necessary, it's the Ulama who are well versed in matters of Islamic law who will take over the leadership of Pakistan to kind of, take it on its onward journey, so to say. And Shabir Ahmad Usmani says that, well, I've had several chats with Mr. Jinnah, and whether or not we need to place any credence on Usmani's claims, but nonetheless, Usmani says that he has had chats with Mr. Jinnah, and that Mr. Jinnah has said that once Pakistan has been achieved, he's going to retire, and that bhai aap isko jo banana hai, aap isko bana sakte hain. You can take on the leadership, create it into an Islamic state, that I'm going to retire. And he also points out, look at Mr. Jinnah's various speeches in which he's pointed out that Pakistan is going to be an Islamic state, that the Sharia is going to be the basis of law in Pakistan, so on and so forth. So to kind of put it in a nutshell, you have, of course, the so-called secular leadership of the Muslim League, which is at the forefront of the movement for the creation of Pakistan. But I soak the word so-called because I don't think the term secular is apposite or apt here. And then, of course, you have the Ulama, who align with the Muslim League and make these theological arguments for the creation of Pakistan. And more interestingly, what also happens is that as the campaign, you have the elections of 1945-46 happening, and you have mass campaigning happening, the Muslim League campaigning in all these Muslim seats across India. And you need to remember that, these public meetings or political conferences or election meetings are not just being attended by the people who are voting. These become, shows of strength, just like abhi bhi aap bhai Delhi mein, kya kehte hain wo, Ramlila Maidan mein, or I don't know what's it called, boats club, whatever, you have people, lakhs of people attending these public meetings or whatever. you have, these very largely well-attended public meetings which are being addressed by the Congress as well as the Muslim League, in which they are kind of, pushing for their candidates, vote for, either the Muslim League candidate or the Congress candidate. So even though there is limited franchise, this is a spectacle which is happening in which, more than the franchisees are participating in this spectacle, in this election process. And so during this election campaign, what you have is a kind of an osmosis as far as ideas of the Ulama and the Muslim League and the Muslim leadership are concerned, in which the Muslim League leadership is increasingly adopting an Islamic vocabulary to kind of reach out to their voters, to reach out to their base. And the Ulama are also using secular arguments for the creation of Pakistan, talking about Pakistan's natural resources, infrastructural assets. Yeah. So, for example, Shabbir Ahmad Usmani points out, this is an alim who's living in Deoband, in what would be currently Saharanpur district, I would presume. And he's saying that, look at it, Pakistan is the land of these 5 rivers. And we need to come up with, or we need to develop a dam building technology so that we can save all these river waters, and we can become the granary of the world. Yeah, we can become the largest wheat producing nation of the world, and that can become a major export for us. And he says, for that reason, our closest friend should be the United States of America, because this is the country which has the most developed dam building technology. And he points out that, hey, look at the Americans. As part of building the Panama Canal, they had dammed the water for an river for an entire year. Yeah. So these are the people that we need to be allying with. So, what you have is, increasingly, a common vocabulary adopted by both the Muslim League leadership and the Ulama to campaign for Pakistan. And we need to remember that the Ulama campaign extensively for Pakistan during these elections. Shabbir Ahmad Usmani himself campaigns in Northwest Frontier Province as well as in Sylhet. Yeah, so when he goes to Northwest Frontier Province, he says, where are the Ghaznis and the Ghoris? You guys need to kind of, do your part during these elections. Vote for the Muslim League. Mr. Jinnah himself goes on to say that even if the Muslim League candidate is a lamppost, you better vote for him.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this point in your book too, the lamppost point.
Yeah. I would like to also lay out, the critiques of Pakistan, because that is also important. Because as I said,
that's what I wanted to tell you. We can take the critiques of Pakistan, and I might set it up as part 2 of the podcast. We can let people know about the critiques of the podcast.
Sure. And in fact, this is chapter 5 of my book. It's called Ulama at the Forefront of Politics. 3 critiques of Pakistan. And these are, the first critique comes out within weeks of the Lahore Resolution in April of 1940. And this is made by an alim from Bihar, is a man by the name of Maulana Sayyid Muhammad Sajjad. He is also the Imarat-e Sharia, which still exists in Patna. And Sajjad, of course, points out how this is going to be disastrous for the Muslims of the minority provinces. कि भाई आप तो वहाँ पाकिस्तान बना लेंगे, हमारा क्या होगा यहाँ पे जो हिंदुस्तान में रह जाएंगे मुसलमान. उनकी तो बहुत दुर्दशा होगी यहाँ पे. And he comes up with a series of very, very articulate, reasoned arguments against the creation of Pakistan. First of all, he begins with, asking about, the Muslim League is claiming that they are going to create an Islamic state in Pakistan. He says, what nonsense are you talking about? He says, look at the person who's leading this. Is Mr. Jinnah. He's hardly an observant Muslim. So is this the fellow who's going to lead us into a glorious Islamic future? Yeah. So that's the first thing. Secondly, he points out that Mr. Jinnah is not just this unobservant Muslim; he's also a British stooge. Yeah, who's very much playing into the British divide and rule theory. Thirdly, he points out that look at this. Mufti Jinnah is talking about parliament, elections, minority rights, so on and so forth in Pakistan. He says, in an Islamic state, we can't. How do you marry an Islamic state and parliamentary democracy? That's not an Islamic state. So what is Mr. Jinnah talking about? So first questioning Mr. Jinnah's credentials to lead Pakistan into a glorious Islamic future, and secondly, questioning the credibility of this claim that Pakistan is going to be an Islamic state. The third thing that Sajjad points out is, and here I think this is something that we have not talked about thus far, is the Muslim League's famous hostage population theory. Yeah. So one of the things that the Muslim League leadership, right from Mr. Jinnah at the top to the local secretary of the Muslim League in a district, let's say, Badaयूं in UP, points out is this so-called hostage population theory. Now, what is this hostage population theory? Well, one of the things which is pointed out is that the creation of Pakistan is hardly going to resolve the communal problem in India, because after all, if you look at the statistics, you will still have about 45%, 43-45% non-Muslim minority in East and West Pakistan. Yeah, so probably about 43% or 45% in Punjab, and 43 or 45% in Bengal. I'm not sure of the exact statistics, but it's in this ballpark, 43 to 45%. Yeah. So how can you actually create an Islamic state in which nearly 50% of the population is non-Muslim? So the argument that the Muslim League comes up with is this, that okay, sure, we will have this massive non-Muslim minority population, but don't take just Punjab and Bengal, also include the other provinces. Yeah, so if you add up Sindh, Balochistan, frontier province along with Punjab and Bengal, you would have Muslim majority which would be closer to 70%. Yeah, so the Hindus would be about 30%. Let's say, even if you are more generous, let's say 40%, it's going to be a decisive 60-20 or 70-30 majority minority breakup. The other thing to remember is that you have said that what about the Muslim population would be left behind in Hindu India? And this would be about 10% of the population which would be left behind in Hindu India. And one needs to remember that here again is that the earliest, most overwhelming and sustained support for the idea of Pakistan or for the Muslim League comes from the Muslim minority provinces of British India, that is places like UP, Bihar, so on and so forth, UP, Bihar, CP, so on and so forth. As in fact, I quote in one of the head quotes in my chapter, this is a New York Times 1942 report, by this guy called Herbert Matthews, who's the correspondent of the New York Times in India. He says, support for Pakistan is strongest in the provinces with Muslim minorities where the Congress was in power, and weakest in the Punjab and Bengal where there are Muslim majorities. So the question is, bhai, these are our supporters. These are the people, जिन्होंने Muslim League के लिए चंदा दिया है, who have showed up at the meetings, who have provided the most vocal, vociferous, and overwhelming support for the Muslim League, and they are also supporting the idea of Pakistan.
Yep.
They are going to be 10% left behind in Hindu India. Are we sacrificing them? What's going to happen? Unka kya hashr hoga? So the Muslim League comes up with two arguments, yeah, Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League, and I'm not excluding Jinnah, I'm saying Mr. Jinnah himself, yeah. Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League come up with two arguments. First comes to be known as the hostage population theory. That is, कि भाई, just as there is a Muslim minority in Hindu India, there's going to be a Hindu/Sikh minority in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So in case there is communal rioting or violence which happens against Muslims in India, in Hindu India, vengeance can also be visited upon as far as the non-Muslim minority in Pakistan is concerned. So this is really a kind of a very, very, very insidious, very, very pernicious hostage population theory, that there are communal hostages on both sides of the border. तो अगर भाई हमारी पिटाई यहाँ हुई तो उनकी पिटाई वहाँ होगी. Yeah. So it's kind of, in a way, the only other parallel that I can think of is this mutually assured destruction, theory, which comes into, some currency during the Cold War, that the United States and the Russians have similar number of nuclear missiles. So, if these guys try to bomb us out of existence, we can bomb them out of existence too, so something which is kind of similar. So there's this hostage population theory, which the Muslim League tom-toms about. Ki bhai, don't worry, your security is going to be guaranteed by the fact that we also have a Hindu minority which is going to be there in Pakistan. The second justification which Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League put forth to the Muslim base that they have in UP, Bihar, places like that, is that of sacrifice. Why can't you sacrifice yourself for the sake of creating an Islamic state in Pakistan? And in fact, Mr. Jinnah is fairly forthright and blunt in his public speeches. So he goes to Kanpur in April 1941, and while he is addressing a meeting of the Muslim students, he says, and I quote, and this is from the speeches and statements of Mr. Jinnah. Mr. Jinnah says that he is willing to allow the 2 crores of Muslims who would fall in the minority provinces to be smashed in order to liberate the 7 crores of Muslims in the majority provinces. Now, these are some of the twin planks. These are 2 major planks of the Muslim League for the creation, justifying Pakistan. Saying कि एक तो, there is this hostage populations which will make sure that there is peace on both sides, and 2, that ठीक है भाई, आप खत्म हो गए तो खत्म हो गए, लेकिन ठीक है, you need to make that necessary sacrifice for the creation of Pakistan. Now Maulana Sajjad, then another Maulana that I bring up with, this is Maulana Hifzur Rahman Harvi, and this Aligarhian, that I also bring up, a man by the name of Tufail Ahmad Manglori, who's a nationalist Muslim. And I'm told, I think his granddaughter happens to be Mr. Hamid Ansari's wife. I'm not sure whether that's true, but that was what I was told. So these are nationalist Muslims, and they come up with, they say that what kind of madness is this? What are you talking about? Why would, this hostage population theory is such a pernicious theory? First of all, it is pernicious theory. Why would you beat up innocents on the other side if somebody is being beaten up here? Yeah. So the Hindus and Sikhs in some part of Pakistan may be completely innocent. Why would you beat them up, or why would violence be visited upon them in case a communal riot has happened in India where Muslims have been killed or beaten or so on and so forth, or vice versa? Yeah, this is such a mad theory, such a terrible thing to talk about. Secondly, he says, nowhere in the Sharia is there justification, any kind of ethical justification for this kind of behavior by states against their minority populations. Yeah. Thirdly, you look at contemporary reality. He says, you look at it. In 1857, the Indian Muslims sent requests to Turkey as the largest Muslim power to intervene, to help them in the fight against the British, for the War of Independence. Turkey kept out. Yeah. They did not come. Oh, sorry, I'm kind of jumping to the other argument. The other argument, of course, is that in case, Muslims are oppressed in India, Pakistan would intervene either in international forums or go to war with Hindu India to kind of rescue its Indian Muslims. So this is the other part, or the other leg of the hostage population theory. So the nationalist ulama, the nationalist Muslims, they kind of come up with strong arguments against this kind of nonsense. They say, first of all, this hostage population theory is totally unjustified because it involves violence against innocents, just to balance out things. Secondly, nowhere in the Sharia is it, is this under the Sharia, this is also not tenable or justifiable. Thirdly, when has it happened? It has not happened anywhere. You see, in the you have in the British Empire, Muslims being subjected or being oppressed or atrocities being committed upon Muslims. But is Turkey, the largest Muslim power in the world, oppressing its Christian subjects? It is not. It is not retaliating. So that kind of retaliation nonsense is never going to happen. Secondly, this whole idea that Pakistan is going to intervene to rescue Indian Muslims, either in international fora or by going to war with Hindu India, is also absolute nonsense. Yeah, it has not happened before, and it is not going to happen again. Then the nationalist ulama come up with a series of arguments to show how Pakistan is going to be a totally disastrous thing for the Indian Muslims. So, for example, they point out that, hey, this is the kind of divide and rule theory that that the British came up with to break up the Turkish Empire, to divide Muslims between the Turks and the Arabs. This is how they have fostered Arab nationalism and then enslaved the Arabs themselves. Yeah, they have hardly given the Arabs, the Arab state that they had promised at the end of World War One. So that is the one thing. So they say that the British are playing the same divide and rule theory as far as the Indian Muslims are concerned, as far as Indians are concerned, and that we need to have a muttahida qawmiyat, that is a composite nationality of Hindus and Muslims. And here somebody like Hussain Ahmad Madani says that this kind of a compact between Muslims and non-Muslims happened in Medina under the Prophet. Medina again comes into play here, in which he says the Muslims and the Jews are brought together under a compact by the Prophet, which is known as the Covenant of Medina. So if there was this precedent, why can't Indian Muslims and Hindus come in a compact to kind of throw out the British? So there are a series of, then it points out how, the nationalist ulama point out how Pakistan is going to be a stillborn state. It's not going to be economically sustainable. It hardly has any economic resources. That it is going to be, it's going to be reduced to a satellite, if not of Britain, but certainly of the United States. So in that regard, they're quite far-sighted. They say, that Pakistan will not be able to sustain by itself, and that before long it will become, for defense purposes or for economic purposes, it is going to become a satellite of the Western powers like Britain or the United States. The other argument is that, the moment you say that Pakistan is, the home Indian Muslims, you are going to create very, very hostile conditions for the Muslims in India. Yeah. They might be denied, bank loans, for example. They might be disenfranchised in India, so on and so forth. So that the Indian Muslims who are the Muslims who are going to be left behind in India will have to pay a very heavy price for the creation of Pakistan. That is the other argument that these people make. So the nationalist ulama make these series of arguments to show how Pakistan is going to be a total disaster for Indian Muslims. And they make very, very far-sighted arguments.
So Venkatji, I wanted to end our podcast by asking you a very specific question about this article that had come in the Huffington Post by Rupa Subramania. I had actually shared this over email with you too. So I just wanted to know what were your views on the same article.
Yeah, I just quickly read through it earlier this morning, and from what I remember of it, she's making a few points. First is that that during the 1945-46 elections, which were dubbed a referendum on Pakistan by the Muslim League, the Muslim League basically swept the poll, winning 75% of the vote. Now, this is, I think, what she's pointing out is that generally people think that this was the popular vote, but she is saying that most people do not seem to realize is that qualifications on franchise, and so people with only certain amount of income or property or whatever could vote for in these elections, and so the electorate was about 14% or 15% of the overall population. So within this 14% of people voting, there was no universal adult franchise. The Muslim League won 75%. So that further reduces the support that the Muslim League got for for the demand for. So I guess I presume that she is making this point to make aware the general public aware that there were these very important income and property qualifications, and so the franchise was extremely limited. I think the second point that she is making is that it's not just that the people who were participating as voters in this election were a very small minority of India, the elites, so to say. What she's also saying, I think quite explicit, is that people like Nehru and Jinnah and the parties that they came from or led, that is the Congress and the Muslim League too, where that first of all that these leaders were not mass leaders. They were elites who did not command either the support or the affection of the masses of Indians. And thirdly, that indeed these parties, them if the franchise were universally if there was universal adult franchise in India, possibly other parties other than the Congress and the Muslim League may have emerged and perhaps done better than these parties. Now, and so I think the implication is that most Indian Muslims did not support the movement for the creation of Pakistan, and so we have no business of blaming the current generation of Indians for the imagined sins of their forefathers. Yeah. Now she is right on the fact that of course there are qualifications as far as franchise is concerned, and that franchise is restricted to a very small minority in India. But I would say I would have problems with her assertion that the Congress and the Muslim League were not truly popular, or that Mr. Jinnah or Mr. Nehru were not very popular leaders. I think there is a huge body of scholarship to begin with, which shows how to begin with, if you look at just the trajectory of the Indian National Congress itself, from a grouping of Anglicized lawyers who meet in 1885 in Bombay, from its progression from that elite grouping to becoming a more mass-based organization and a truly popular organization with membership running into millions and enjoying the widest possible support in India. I think that really needs to be taken into account. If you look at it, the Congress between 1885 and let's say even if you were to discount the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, even if you say that, till let's say 1920, the Congress remains a somewhat elitist organization, you cannot say that from 1920 onwards. You have, Gandhi who comes in and, changes the character of the Congress. You have a new constitution that the Congress gives itself in 1920, which really opens up its membership to the wider public in India. You have the Charana membership. You pay 4 annas and you become a Congress member. You have the Congress organization itself being restructured based on elections at various levels. So you have the village Congress committee, the Taluka Congress committee, the town Congress committee, the district Congress committee, the Pradesh Congress committees, so all these different levels of the Congress electing delegates to the next higher level. Then you have the All India Congress Committee, you have the Congress Working Committee, which comes up, the Congress President, the General Secretaries of the party. So this becomes the largest political movement in the world. And so to say that that the Congress is a party which really does not enjoy mass adulation or popular support, I think is a rather untenable claim. And so is the claim that Mr. Nehru or Mr. Jinnah were not popular leaders. To say that Nehru before 1947 was not a popular leader, that he was an elitist, I think is not a claim based on fact. This is an absurd claim. Nehru is a really, really popular leader. In fact, he is, the Congress's main, one of the Congress's most charismatic leaders, and I think after Gandhi, is perhaps the most popular at the level of the masses. You can say that within the Congress organization, Vallabhbhai Patel would have any day beaten Gandhi, but I think as far which is why the Mahatma himself has when it comes to selecting his successor, so to say, and people may have all kinds of problems with such anointments, but Gandhi chooses Nehru for a particular reason, and Nehru is indeed extremely popular. Given the record of his service for the nationalist movement, the amount of time he spends in prison, the philanthropy, the charity that the family does, so on and so forth. This is a family with a record of participation in the freedom struggle, beginning with Motilal Nehru. So Nehru is very popular. And you could say the same thing about Mr. Jinnah himself, who after, he is a very prominent leader, Indian Muslim leader, even before Gandhi enters the scene. Indeed, he is one of the men who signs, the Lucknow Pact, between the Congress and the Muslim League, 1916. And Jinnah through the 20s and 30s is certainly a very prominent leader, but of course he is upstaged by Gandhi. And within the Muslim political circles, you have the rise of the Ali brothers and others. But Jinnah continues to be a very important leader whose views are taken into account at every possible juncture whenever there are meetings or roundtable conferences, whatever you may have, to kind of resolve the communal problem in India. You have Jinnah's famous 14 points, so on and so forth. So he is somebody you cannot ignore. But the thing that needs to be remembered is that after the 1935 Government of India Act and elections which happen under the Government of India Act, and you have the Muslim League also now beginning to act as a political machine. They have to also go to the voters, seek votes, campaign, so on and so forth. The Muslim League also begins to take several leaves out of the Congress playbook and recast itself as a popular party. And Mr. Jinnah emerges as a very, very popular leader. So the title given to him, Qaid-e-Azam, the great leader, is not it means something, and it's based on the enormous popularity that he generates. So the Muslim League also during this after the 1936-37 elections emerges as a popular party. And you have, of course, the Muslim League replicating the processes that the Congress had that the Congress had included in its constitution. So you have, of course, the town, the district, the province, Muslim leagues, the Muslim League Working Committee, the the Executive Council of the Muslim League, so on and so forth. So a very similar structure the Muslim League assumes. It also is a party which truly becomes a mass-based political party. One of the things that Mr. Jinnah and the Muslim League leadership never tired of saying is that, you look at the Congress, a lot of the money that it gets to kind of run its programs, its campaigns, or whatever it is, to function, let's say, on a day-to-day basis, comes from big donations from the likes of Birlas and Dalmias and all these Hindu industrialists. And say, look at the Muslim League, it's a party which survives on the donations by millions of ordinary Muslims. So between 37 and 47, the Muslim League is no longer a party of Khan Bahadurs and Nawabs and Sirs and Knights of the Raj, but it's a party which, even though it may have these elements who are also occupying important positions, it becomes a truly popular party. So and you look at Mr. Jinnah himself, the way his vocabulary changes, his sartorial style changes between 37 and 47. This is a man who then, when he begins to appear in public and address public meetings, begins, sheds his European suits and begins to wear, the sherwani, the chudidar, the samur cap, so on and so forth. Mr. Jinnah is also somebody who then begins to, use an Islamic rhetoric in his public meetings. The meetings of the Muslim League always begin with recitations from the Quran, so on and so forth. You also have, Mr. Jinnah beginning to go to mosques, and Ambedkar notices this in his book Thoughts on Pakistan, that Mr. Jinnah is suddenly going to the mosque in Nal Bazar in Bombay, and beginning to pray, to kind of appear devout. So so this idea that either Mr. Jinnah or Mr. Nehru may have been elitist leaders without not commanding the popular support, I think is simply not based on fact, or that the Congress and the Muslim League were not truly representative organizations of Indians. I don't think that is also based on fact either. The final, what's the last point I wanted to make? The thing to remember is that even though the franchise is limited to 14% of the population, the movement, the Pakistan movement, involves a much larger number of people, and this is primarily, you can say this is primarily as a result of processes of modernization which take hold over India in from the 19th century onwards. You have the rise of print, newspapers, rise of communications, transport and communications, so on and so forth. So even though, of course, they didn't have internet like we do now, or Twitter, for example, for one of the newspapers that I used quite a lot for my work is this newspaper called Medina, which used to come out of Bijnor. And the thing you notice is that the Medina as a newspaper has a following in different parts of India. The Medina is reporting on the reportage of other newspapers in different parts of India. The other newspapers are carrying reports of the Medina. And in fact, in 1942, in one of my chapters, I talk about how, the editor of the Medina opens up the columns of the newspaper to the readers, saying, why don't you send in your responses or your letters telling us what you think of Pakistan, what you understand by it, do you like it, do you don't like it, why do you support it, why do you oppose it? And in this context, of this is wartime, there is quotas on newsprint. The newspapers, size itself has shrunk, to half. And in this context, you have readers writing to the editor, and out of these, he picks up two most coherent and cogent essays, one by a supporter of Pakistan, one by an opponent of Pakistan. And these people then lay out why they support Pakistan. And both of these are ordinary Muslims. So the other thing to remember is that the historian Chris Bailey talked about the presence of what he called an informational order in India, in which made for fairly rapid as well as widespread flows of information, intelligence, opinions, ideas, so on and so forth. And the thing to remember is that, as he points out, that even though India is a society with fairly low levels of literacy, it's a society with fairly very high levels of political awareness and intelligence. And therefore, the one thing one notices is that the public meetings, the political conferences of either the Congress or the Muslim League are massively attended. Yeah. And it's not as if the party or the parties or the leadership are just reaching out to the 14%. They're reaching out to the Indian population at large, to their constituencies or to their supporters at large. So the Muslim League, if it wants to claim to be the sole authoritative representative organization of the Indian Muslims, Musalmano ki Wahid Numayinda Jamaat, it needs to show that it has support which is much more widespread than the 14% who are taking part. And so also is the case with the Congress. And indeed, if the Congress or the Muslim League were to be merely elitist organizations, the colonial state, the British government could have just swatted them away, dismissed them, saying, you don't really represent Indians generally. Why the hell should we talk to you? Yeah. So then, the other thing you can say is that, the whole movement for Indian independence or freedom for, either Indian independence or the creation of Pakistan was basically a minority phenomena. In that sense, very small sections of population wanted it. The large sections would have been happy with British rule, I think, which is also another rather absurd thing to say. So I would say that yes, I would personally argue that given the intense public discussions, debates, wrangles, over Pakistan independence, so on and so forth, which have in India between 1940 and 47, much larger numbers of people are sucked up into this whole process. That is not to say that there were people who were undecided or who did not care for it or whatever, but to just say that it's only 14% of the population which is involved in this process, I think would be rather reductionist. And so I would say that it would be rather naive to believe that just 14% of the population, was involved in this process. But I would also like to conclude with saying that, as I have mentioned it in my book, there is a debate within the Muslim community on the question of Pakistan. In fact, if you look at my book, every chapter is, it looks at debates within the Muslim community. So these are intra-Muslim debates. So if you look at chapter 1, you have various Muslim groups fighting the 1937 elections. Chapter 2 looks at on the one hand you have the leftist Muslims, the Congress Muslims on the one side, and coming up with their Muslim mass contact program and doing battle with the Muslim League leadership. The third chapter, of course, looks at the debate between Ambedkar and Jinnah. The fourth chapter talks about how the Muslim League itself presents the idea of Pakistan in the UP. And the fifth chapter is about critiques of these ideas, or critiques of this idea of Pakistan. Chapter 6 is, of course, a debate between a supporter and an opponent of Pakistan. Yeah, so every chapter is, structured in terms of a series of intra-Muslim debates. So even though the folks who support an undivided India are a minority, and that there is the Muslim League, of course, has a much greater support as far as the Muslim community is concerned, one still needs to remember that some of the most eloquent critiques of Pakistan come from within the Muslim community. So I guess that is what I would say. And but the thing is, I guess these historical episodes assume a very different valence and charge in a contemporary context. So I presume, which is why there is such a lot of, how should you say, agitation.
In my view, the problem seems to be that there is a lot of lack of data. I think purely going by the 1946 election data for any side, whether it's for the side who wants to claim that look, the Muslim League had a lot of support, or for the side that claims the Muslim League did not have support, is actually is not the right way to go about this episode, is because there was not a lot of data, and to make any guesstimate out of that election result or that data set would be unfair. I think the best way to go about it is what I call, I think in science they call it a meta-analysis, where you actually do a quantitative analysis of different kinds of fields, where you look at newspapers, you look at rally attendances, and when you come up at you create a cumulative data set by these different kinds of observations, then you can have a more accurate answer as such about a complicated question like whether the idea of Pakistan had support or not. Anyways, I before we end the podcast, I have to ask you this question. How the hell have you managed to stay off the grid? You're not on Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp.
It's
what
a
made you do
personal
that?
choice. I kind of value my privacy, and I like leading a very low profile life. This is probably the most high profile thing I've done, which is write this book. So from a no profile, I have at least a little bit of profile now. But no, it's just a question of choice. I admire people who are on all these media, because I wonder how they have the time for all this. I have a I have a family, I have a job, and so between these two, I really don't have much time, and I also feel that. I also hardly watch any TV. When I look at these TV debates, this basically devolve into shouting matches, and hardly, anything of substance gets discussed in a sober manner. And I would presume the same goes with something like Twitter, in which I presume you have to, in a very, very briefly, you have to say something. And then there is people constantly reacting and reacting all over again to something which becomes viral or whatever it is. And this is hardly conducive to any kind of contemplation or contemplative response, I would say. So, I prefer to just, lie low, live my life. Read and write whatever I can, but I also, I'm also extremely loath to saying something before, I'm actually very sure about what I'm saying, and I have researched what I have, I've done my homework properly. So, which is why I guess even this book took me 11 years to finish. So maybe I'm a little too slow. My wife would always keep badgering me about this, but and I often am quite speechless when people have, I think, views and opinions on just about everything under the sun. I find it very difficult
Oh,
to say something about a whole lot of things beyond my own little ken of expertise. I hate the word expertise, but I know a little bit, let's say, about the so I'm saying what I have to say. And of course, people are free to agree, disagree, whatever. But I generally like to keep myself, or I tend to be more cautious, let's say, when it comes to expressing myself. That's all.
Yeah, actually, in my view, we are staying in the age of people being over opinionated and under informed. That's what. That's the reality. And it's amazing. Your calm demeanor itself is a proof that you're off of social media. Because if you're on social media, it's very hard to stay calm. You're
No, I have
constantly
no idea
angry.
what like or what Twitter is like. I really have no idea. So I'm happy. Ignorance is bliss,
Yeah.
I
So,
presume.
yeah, that's true. Believe me, you're a happy person, and you should stay happy if you stay off of it. So, Venkatji, once again, thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to
Yeah,
speak
thank
to
you very
you. I'm
much,
really
Kushal.
grateful.
Yeah, bye bye.
Take care again.